A solitary peak rises with unusual precision from the rolling terrain of North Carolina's Piedmont, visible from miles away as a near-perfect dome capped by a narrower column-like summit. Why does this mountain stand alone when the surrounding landscape appears worn and subdued? Why does its upper crown resist ordinary access, defying the expectations of even experienced hikers? And what sequence of geological events could produce a formation that looks at a distance like a remnant from a completely different region? These questions emerge quickly for anyone traveling along the corridor that connects the Appalachian interior to the southeastern coastal plain, where the skyline is briefly interrupted by a structure that does not conform to the broader topographic pattern. Pilot Mountain occupies a position within the Town Range, itself an outlying chain that diverges from the more continuous Appalachian ridges. The surrounding terrain typically consists of low-relief hills and gently sloping surfaces, shaped by extended periods of weathering and erosion. Against this backdrop, the mountain's steep-sided pinnacle rises abruptly to approximately 1,400 feet, or about 430 meters, above sea level, with the upper knob forming a distinct cap that appears almost detached from the broader base below. The visual effect is immediate and persistent, creating the impression of an isolated geological remnant rather than part of an interconnected system. From a distance, the formation suggests a layered structure with lighter-toned rock exposed along vertical faces that catch sunlight differently throughout the day. The surface texture appears jagged and angular, contrasting sharply with the smoother vegetated slopes at lower elevations. As observers approach, the transition becomes more pronounced, with the mountain shifting from a distant landmark into a sharply defined mass of exposed rock and forested flanks. The uppermost section, often referred to as the knob, stands apart due to its sheer walls, which drop almost vertically and limit direct access to the summit. The inability to walk to the top is not a matter of trail design or land management decisions, but rather a direct consequence of the mountain's structure. The cliffs encircling the summit form a near-continuous barrier, rising steeply from the surrounding slopes and preventing any gradual ascent. These walls are composed of quartzite, a metamorphic rock known for its durability and resistance to erosion. Unlike softer sedimentary layers that gradually wear down into rounded forms, quartzite maintains sharp edges and steep profiles, particularly when fractured along natural joints. The geological origin of this quartzite begins with ancient sand deposits, laid down hundreds of millions of years ago in environments that likely resembled coastal plains or shallow marine settings. Over time, these sediments were buried under additional layers, subjected to increasing pressure and temperature. During the mountain-building episodes that shaped the Appalachian region, the original sandstone underwent transformation, with individual grains recrystallizing into a dense, interlocking structure. This process produced quartzite, a rock that retains some visual similarities to its precursor while exhibiting significantly greater strength. Close inspection of exposed surfaces reveals features that record this transformation. The rock contains subtle banding and foliation, indicating directional pressure during metamorphism. In some sections, small folds are visible, with layers bending in tight, wave-like patterns that suggest compression at depth. These structures are not immediately apparent from afar, but become clearer when viewed along the lower slopes or from vantage points that align with the rock's internal layering. The arrangement of joints within the quartzite plays a critical role in shaping the mountain's present form. Vertical fractures divide the rock into blocks, which gradually separate over time as weathering processes exploit these weaknesses. Water enters the cracks, expanding during temperature fluctuations and slowly prying the rock apart. As pieces detach, they fall along the steep slopes, accumulating at the base in talus deposits that mark the ongoing breakdown of the formation. Despite this continuous erosion, the overall structure remains intact due to the inherent resistance of the quartzite. The broader base of Pilot Mountain consists of less resistant materials that have eroded more rapidly over geological time. This differential erosion explains the mountain's pronounced relief relative to its surroundings. While the softer rocks have been worn down into rolling hills, the quartzite cap persists as a prominent high point. The result is a landscape in which the mountain appears almost as a remnant of a former surface level, preserved while everything around it has been lowered. This pattern is consistent with other isolated peaks in the region, though few display the same degree of symmetry and prominence. The Soratown Mountains include several ridges and peaks formed from similar materials, but Pilot Mountain stands out due to the distinct separation between its base and summit. The knob's cylindrical shape, combined with the uniformity of its cliffs, contributes to its recognition as a singular feature within the regional topography. Observations of the rock surface reveal additional details that connect the mountain to its sedimentary origins. In certain areas, faint diagonal patterns can be detected, resembling cross-bedding typically associated with shifting sand deposits. These features are not always clearly preserved in metamorphic rocks, as the processes involved in their transformation often obscure or erase original structures. Their presence here suggests that portions of the rock retained some of their initial characteristics, despite significant alteration. The persistence of these patterns raises questions about the conditions under which the rock was transformed. The degree of metamorphism appears sufficient to produce a strong, cohesive material, yet not so intense as to completely eliminate sedimentary textures. This balance provides valuable insight into the thermal and pressure conditions experienced during the mountain's formation, indicating a complex history that does not conform to a single, uniform process. The mountain's position relative to surrounding formations further emphasizes its uniqueness. To the east, the Blue Ridge rises as a more continuous system of ridges and valleys, while the Piedmont extends outward with comparatively subdued relief. Pilot Mountain exists between these domains, reflecting influences from both, but fully aligning with neither. Its composition links it to deeper geological processes associated with the Appalachians, while its isolation reflects the long-term effects of erosion acting unevenly across different rock types. The steepness of the cliffs not only limits access but also affects how the mountain interacts with environmental conditions. Wind patterns shift around the formation, with air currents accelerating along the exposed faces. Moisture levels vary between shaded and sunlit sections, influencing the distribution of vegetation. While the lower slopes support forests typical of the region, the upper cliffs remain largely bare, with only sparse plant life able to establish itself in narrow crevices. This contrast between vegetated and exposed areas highlights the role of surface conditions in shaping ecological patterns. Soil development is minimal on the quartzite faces, as the rock provides little opportunity for accumulation. Without sufficient soil, plant roots cannot anchor effectively, further reinforcing the stark appearance of the cliffs. Over time, small pockets of debris may collect in sheltered locations, allowing limited growth, but these areas remain exceptions rather than the norm. The mountain's long-term evolution is governed by the same processes that created its current form. Weathering continues to act on the rock, gradually widening fractures and dislodging material. Erosion transports this material downslope, contributing to the gradual reduction of the formation. However, given the durability of quartzite, this process occurs at a relatively slow rate, measured in increments that extend far beyond human timescales. Estimates suggest that the general shape of the pinnacle could persist for tens of thousands of years, even as smaller changes occur along its surface. Comparisons are often drawn between Pilot Mountain and other isolated formations around the world, particularly those characterized by resistant caps overlying weaker substrates. While the scale differs, the underlying principle remains consistent. Differential erosion creates features that stand apart from their surroundings. In this context, the mountain can be understood as part of a broader category of landforms that emerge through the selective removal of less durable material. Despite its prominence, direct study of the summit area remains limited due to accessibility constraints. Most observations are conducted from the base or from designated viewpoints that provide partial views of the upper sections. This limitation influences the level of detail available for certain features, particularly those located near the top of the knob. As a result, some aspects of the mountain structure are inferred from visible patterns and comparisons with similar formations rather than direct measurement. The north-facing side of the mountain presents some of the most striking examples of sheer vertical exposure. Here, the cliffs form an almost continuous wall, reinforcing the impression of an isolated mass rising abruptly from the landscape. The uniformity of this face contrasts with more irregular sections elsewhere, where variations in joint orientation and erosion have created ledges and recesses. These differences illustrate how subtle changes in rock structure can influence the development of surface features over time. At its core, Pilot Mountain represents the intersection of several geological processes operating over extended periods. The deposition of sediment, its transformation under pressure and heat, and the subsequent removal of surrounding material all contribute to the formation observed today. Each stage leaves its mark, creating a record that can be read through careful examination of the rock and its arrangement. The result is a landform that challenges initial assumptions about the region. In an area defined largely by gradual slopes and continuous ridges, the presence of a steep, isolated pinnacle introduces a different visual and structural element. Its resistance to direct ascent is not an anomaly, but a logical outcome of its composition and history, reflecting the inherent properties of the materials involved. As the mountain continues to undergo slow change, the balance between resistance and erosion remains central to its persistence. The same qualities that prevent easy access also ensure its longevity, allowing it to stand as a distinct feature within the Appalachian landscape, while surrounding areas continue to evolve. The structural integrity of Pilot Mountain continues to be defined by the same internal architecture that first elevated it above the surrounding terrain, with its quartzite core acting as both a shield and a framework. The vertical joints that segment the rock mass are not randomly distributed, but follow patterns established during deep geological stress, creating planes of weakness that guide how the mountain gradually changes over time. These fractures are critical in understanding why the formation maintains its steep, almost engineered appearance, even as it is slowly reduced by natural forces. Instead of collapsing in large catastrophic sections, the rock tends to separate along these joints in smaller increments, preserving the recognizable silhouette of the knob while subtly altering its surface. At the base of the cliffs, accumulations of broken rock fragments form sloping deposits that trace the ongoing interaction between gravity and structural weakness. These deposits, often angular and uneven, indicate relatively recent detachment events when compared to the smoother, weathered surfaces found farther from the cliff line. Each fragment represents a small portion of the mountain's outer shell, removed through a combination of mechanical weathering and environmental stress. Temperature variation plays a consistent role, particularly as cycles of heating and cooling expand and contract the rock, widening fractures over extended periods. Water infiltration further accelerates this process, entering cracks and exerting pressure as conditions change. Although the region does not experience prolonged freezing conditions at high frequency, even limited expansion within confined spaces contributes to the gradual separation of rock units. Over time, these processes create a cycle in which exposed surfaces become increasingly fractured, leading to eventual detachment and downslope movement. The persistence of steep cliff faces suggests that removal rates are balanced by the strength of the remaining quartzite, preventing rapid flattening of the formation. The upper knob remains the most visually dominant element, not only because of its elevation but also due to its geometric clarity. Unlike many peaks that taper irregularly, This summit retains a defined boundary between vertical exposure and the more vegetated lower slopes. The absence of transitional terrain reinforces the perception that the summit exists as a separate entity, elevated above its own base. This separation is not literal in a structural sense, but it reflects the differential resistance between rock layers, with the quartzite cap maintaining a level of cohesion that the surrounding materials cannot match. The broader landscape continues to evolve around this central feature, with erosion gradually lowering adjacent terrain. Streams and surface runoff transport fine sediments away from the area, redistributing material into lower elevations and contributing to the long-term smoothing of the Piedmont. In contrast, the mountain's resistant core limits the rate at which its own elevation decreases, allowing it to remain prominent even as the surrounding land shifts. This imbalance ensures that the visual dominance of the formation persists across extended geological intervals. Within the Soratown Range, similar processes have shaped other ridges, though none display the same degree of isolation or vertical prominence. These neighboring formations provide context for understanding how widespread the underlying rock units once were, suggesting that the current landscape represents a reduced version of a more extensive system. Over time, erosion has segmented this system into distinct remnants, with Pilot Mountain representing one of the most intact examples. Its survival is not accidental, but rather a consequence of localized conditions that favored preservation over removal. Surface observations also indicate that the mountain's quartzite contains variations in mineral composition, contributing to subtle differences in color and texture. While the dominant appearance is light gray to off-white, certain sections exhibit darker streaks or patches, reflecting the presence of additional minerals introduced during metamorphism. These variations can influence how different parts of the rock respond to weathering, with some areas breaking down slightly faster than others. This uneven response contributes to the development of small ledges, recesses, and irregularities along the cliff faces. The role of biological activity, while limited on the steepest sections, becomes more apparent along intermediate slopes where vegetation begins to take hold. Roots penetrate fractures, exerting pressure that can widen existing cracks and accelerate the breakdown of rock. Organic material accumulates in sheltered pockets, creating microenvironments where soil can develop. Although these processes operate on a smaller scale compared to physical weathering, they add another layer of complexity to the mountain's gradual transformation. Visibility remains one of the defining characteristics of Pilot Mountain, with its silhouette detectable from considerable distances under clear conditions. This prominence is partly due to its elevation relative to the surrounding terrain, but also to the contrast between its exposed rock and the vegetated landscape around it. Light interacts differently with the quartzite surfaces, often highlighting the cliffs during certain times of day and enhancing the mountain's distinct outline. This visual clarity reinforces its role as a geographic reference point within the region. The restriction on direct access to the summit continues to shape how the mountain is experienced and studied. While lower trails provide multiple vantage points, the uppermost sections remain beyond the reach of conventional hiking routes. This limitation preserves the natural condition of the summit while also constraining the level of detailed observation that can be conducted on site. As a result, much of the understanding of the upper structure relies on indirect analysis, including visual surveys and comparisons with accessible exposures at lower elevations. Over extended time frames, the balance between resistance and erosion will determine the future profile of the mountain. The quartzite's durability ensures that change will remain incremental but not static. Edges will continue to soften, fractures will widen, and isolated blocks will detach. The overall form, however, is likely to remain recognizable for tens of thousands of years, maintaining its status as a distinct feature within the Appalachian landscape. This persistence highlights the importance of material properties in shaping long-term geological outcomes. The presence of cross-bedding features within portions of the rock continues to attract attention due to their unusual preservation. These diagonal structures, formed during the original deposition of sand, provide a link to environments that existed long before the mountain itself took shape. Their survival through metamorphic transformation suggests that the conditions of pressure and temperature, while sufficient to alter the rock's structure, did not completely erase all primary characteristics. This partial preservation offers a rare opportunity to observe both sedimentary and metamorphic features within the same formation. Regional comparisons indicate that similar quartzite units appear sporadically across the broader Appalachian system, though rarely with the same clarity of exposure. In many locations, these rocks are either buried beneath younger materials or weathered into less distinct forms. Pilot Mountain's combination of exposure, accessibility at lower levels, and structural coherence makes it an important reference point for understanding these units in a broader context. It effectively serves as a visible cross-section of processes that are often hidden elsewhere. The mountain's ongoing evolution does not occur in isolation from external influences, as climatic patterns continue to affect rates of weathering and erosion. Variations in precipitation, temperature, and vegetation all contribute to how quickly material is removed or retained. While these factors operate within relatively narrow ranges over short timescales, their cumulative effect becomes significant over extended periods. The current form of the mountain reflects a balance achieved under present conditions, but this balance is subject to change as environmental factors shift. If you found this deep dive informative and engaging, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more detailed explorations like this. Tap that hype icon to help this video reach a wider audience and bring more attention to fascinating geological features around the world.